you've worked with many organizations and trying to discover what is this resulting experience we're trying to create in the life of the customer. What would you say is probably the biggest roadblock or challenge that you see organizations have in this process of trying to figure out what holds them back? What keeps them from finding a value proposition?
Well, first off, a lot of people do find a good value proposition. There are a lot of successful businesses out there. You can't succeed without, in fact, delivering a superior value proposition. Sometimes that's accidental, sometimes that's lucky, and sometimes it's by pretty smart thinking. So it's not like nobody ever thinks this through and gets it right. But there are a lot of obstacles, and people do stumble, and they're for good reasons. What we have on our desks, what our job is, even if our job is to deal with customers, it's to do something specific, some process,
yes,
some function. I'm going to sell to them. I'm going to meet their needs by giving them the service they need. If I'm in product development, I'm working in the lab on the product. If I'm manufacturing, I'm in the plant. It's hard to get completely outside that and say, yes, but what actually happens in the life of the customer on a factual basis, systematically, documented, understood quantitatively. That's difficult. That's a lot of work. It takes a lot of resource, and people can do a bunch of that work and then disagree exactly what it means. It's not simple, like just running a survey and asking customers what are the 10 most important things we should do for you. It's more complex than that, but it's a lot more revealing. It can be a lot more insightful. But it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of commitment. And if people are inherently inclined to want to do what serves their function, their career, their silo, what they're good at, you're not going to make that go away by just saying, well, let's all come together and agree that we love customers. That doesn't make that stuff go away. So you're having to overcome that to some extent and end up doing things that aren't maybe necessarily in the best interest of a given functional agenda. They may not even be in the best interest of the near-term profitability of the business. You got to figure out what point are we trying to get to. Over what point in the future are we going to try to deliver some value proposition profitably? That may be a fairly risky value proposition in the near term, and it may undermine the agenda of 2 or 3 important functions. So it shouldn't be surprising if people aren't happy with some of the conclusions. So it's hard to get to the insight, and it's hard to accept the implications of the insight, and they aren't all black and white. It isn't a simple little formula. So there's a lot of reasons that make it difficult. But if everybody could agree that, okay, it's hard, we're not always going to totally agree, we're not always going to get it exactly right,
Yep.
but trying real hard to get it right and trying to get on the same page about it, that's a kind of noble pursuit that makes a lot of sense and gives you a better chance of succeeding than just deciding who's the most powerful one around here or using some simple little formulaic way of deciding these kinds of strategic choices.
Do you find that as you're working, like the in some sense temptation or the bent is to kind of keep swerving back to the kind of product focus versus
Absolutely. You know, the relationship between being internally driven and customer compelled is kind of funny. People come up with the idea of being customer. We'll go to the customer, we'll do surveys, we'll promise them everything. What do you need for total satisfaction? We'll do that. We'll write all that down. We're going to do it. Well, all that leads to a set of things which, added up, we probably can't do in most cases, and are no different than what the competition's hearing. So they're kind of trying to promise the same thing and do much the same thing. So we're not very differentiated, and the more we add on, the more unprofitable it tends to be. So what do we end up doing? Well, we don't just go crazy and say the heck with it. We go back to, among the things the customer said they want, what are the ones that happen to meet what we're good at? Well, guess what that ends up looking like? The same conclusion I would have drawn by figuring out what am I good at. It's not that different usually. The customer compelled approach is a way of kind of reacting to the problem that you can't just try to do what you want to do when the customer doesn't want it. So you go ask the customer what to do. If you don't think that through in the right way, you just end up going back to being internally driven. So I'm suggesting not a mix of those two, as some people think of it. If I on odd days I'm internally driven and on even days I'm customer compelled. No, forget that. There's a third path which says, let me go and study what it's like being the customer. What's their business? If they're a business, what value proposition are they trying to deliver to their customer? Who are their competition? What are they trying to accomplish? Where are they falling short? Do they need to expand their market? Do they need to increase their market share? Are they unprofitable? Is their cost too high? What's wrong with their business? Which maybe you can even get some insight that they haven't figured out about what's wrong with their business. But what ways could their business be improved? And then come back and say, how can we make our value proposition about addressing those issues in a way that's profitable for us?